이게不知道 그래.
오케이. 네. 네. 야야. 그래서 다시들 상마. 네. 아니 다들이 와서 가상행 그리는 안에 가시. 지반자요나 이티와디 직로 아니 지반자요나 몰레스 지와디 직체. 지와면은 가상행 안에 되는 마음은 되니 안되는 좋아시. 직진이 수로.
So hello everybody, and so just to begin with, if anybody has any questions on what we previously explored last time, please feel free to ask your question, and if there are no questions, then we shall just continue with the text.
Yeah, maybe to me, no? Yeah, 아니 다 가성해는 가서 아니 대시자 대주 네. 다 남비 다 신한다 생각을 봐. 뒤간에 아니 가서 아니 녀몽세 대 먼저 간디 치고 요래. 녀몽 먼저 집에 갑리나 녀몽 그식 먼저 배 mambo 요비 나니 다 찍고 시장으로 주 카르카르래. 아니 디리제의 양치 모도 돈다도 카르카르세 딘디치 아니 대시지. Montani touch Mandriando, Tijikane, as soon Gwenziga definition on Gwenziris.
So last time, our previous explanations were focusing, so within Buddhist philosophy, we were addressing psychology and mainly how different disturbing emotions arise in our mind. So first, the first point we explored was identifying these disturbing emotions, understanding the various types, understanding the basis upon which they arise, and also understanding the nature of each one of these.
Yeah. Tanyumo ne Monzin Tanyumonsia the country Yamata. I need to so call it Kasungolia, this shit. I need to do this and issue somebody. Teneti Jinema, Tanyumong in Nangayan, chick, Senuansia, Numo chicken on Gitambo, and chicken so on the Chasin and Sebasia, teeing on the country Chigiome, Tea Kolean Kasungolia, so Kashes gets Chonroa. What they call the touch three on the Muntuni. There's Hanjos in the Chilma, this she is.
And as regards identifying the different disturbing emotions, I explored this in brief. And then finally, what we were looking at is identifying precisely what disturbing emotions are, and we explored specifically the 6 root afflictions. And specifically within that category of the 6, we looked at attachment, also known as craving. And so there's a little bit more left on this topic, which I'd like to cover today.
Yeah. Tadi touching Sebastian and Doshasiati, Munzi Chebi Kavlia, and the Korangi, any Chile country, young over condition, and the Koranama descend of China, the second chair yours. Gonlia, Casangolia, and the Duduskache, and the Chonres.
And regarding attachment and craving, we looked previously at how it functions, how it is at play within our minds. We explored also the nature as well as the divisions.
Yeah. Tantindi, and a Numonde, Music, and a Sepasia, the Munzinche, then when they check a couple and the chick, Mazo Samlo. And in Chirsos in under Samlo Tanchoch, they are a chick, so and a Saint John Dig, Chili Carres, and a Sebasia, and then the Chassi, Chili Carre, Dig Mazole, no young country chili or said. Tindichevi Cablia, Taco Samlo Tanchoch Gani, Ding on the Chevi Cablia, Cassit Intravate, and a chick palm, Mebas and Resinanda, Counted Dig, Sosolo, Noba Carzotan Nova. And the Malay Tapshi Chevalian, Sozo Samlo Tanchotian, number Chikurgo, number Shambajikani Tango Resionde, Taco del Panimbo de Tangani, Kajan Shigores.
And so when we were exploring the disturbing emotion of attachment, the main thing that we were reflecting upon is the way that we're thinking about things. How does our mind reflect or approach reality when there is attachment in one's mind? And so what we looked at is how sort of mental factors function within our mind, and specifically how attachment, how it harms us, how, it's kind of... how it harms us in our day-to-day life. And then the other thing that we started to look upon is how can we remove attachment from our minds? How are we able to protect ourselves from attachment when it arises? And so one of the things we started to explore is how you can change, in a way, the aspect or change the way it manifests within our mind in order to protect ourselves.
Yeah. Da kola nyimbo ro te tang sin da ti samlo tang so de jawa tang wa sin da ti gong le ka che shebi kable ka zongo le ka che tu chong re chamba nyen sha sin ma bi ta gong le chamba nyen sha nyor sha pa shi se gong ni ta tang su che re ba nyor ti de shi de ye ta tang de she je bi kable ya ane ta chi nga su ane le la mu ba se le la mu be ane chi kam di le se ya de ka zongo le de she tu shi sambai le chu le nang le chuna ni ge le se ti kap ge le se on de in chu nga so zik pon rang le ko mare ta pe na chu le ni na zida chu ro ane re cha nga ga le ko cho re mo tin de la mu be nga so we ne chi ane das se pa se ngona da do cha tin de ke bi kap le ya ta ti ge ne khar so ta ti nyen bon de kan chi ten ko re se on de ane le tam ba nya sha se ya ti kan ne sa lo tan cho chi yong cho re se.
And as regards how we protect ourselves from attachment, and what this means is applying the antidote to attachment. And so we mentioned this last time as regards the 4 placements of the mind, also known as the 4 close placements of the mind, also known as the 4 mindfulnesses. And within the 4 mindfulnesses, the first one is mindfulness of the body. And the body itself is divided into 3, the inner body, the outer body, and the both inner and outer body. It's important to understand that the body doesn't refer just simply to our own personal physical body. It also refers to external forms. So this can include shapes, colors, smell, and so forth. So the point here is to develop, while we do this mindfulness of the body, you're able to develop an understanding and mainly generate the antidote in your mind in relation to the craving which arises in relation to these external forms, which might be smell, shape, and so forth.
Yeah, that didn't couple ya. That janani also chick ane korangi ane sebanishina korangi mupa ti kani muir de pena tanda lindo ina lida aliti ane tela tatang kandita gore korangi ane chick ane karzoro ta chick dokasi na tindi kani yang korangi chick pashoke ane chick zota se chikongro ane chick yepsia tindi kani tatang di 코랑게 무인이 세시 따당시오래 무인이 세 따당시는 다나 덴바랑 차고래 타이나 디강래 양아소요 소소가 텔리아 칠리 기반데 차온데 아니 당무인이 세때 만탐바세 오라다 페나 아니 지 카도르지나 카도데 코랑양 지 코랑 지보 임바 랑싱가 코랑야 부기 지보 요아 강시라 티 땡데 양아소 조다네 하징가 베드가 소소가 베 지 가서로 무인이 셀리 게 따당치오나 디니시니 차바세야디 강을 조여레스 디 따당디 가sol을 아니 딘디가 따당데 식체리 곰디 식체리 챈도나 소소 삼로데야 대당 하신 그 타르니고 베드가 대당 칸자트메원이 차 바쇼 벤 지보 시오지 따상나 대당 베 소소게 지그 심바 땡니 아니 디 강을 봐 아니 삼로 코랑 야샤 망치어지 디 강 쇼도야지 아니 야차 망보지디 강라 대체온데 데니 소소데가 카자트 맹게리 차온데 아니 대 강아디 강아지야 세세도 다 딘디 아니 담바니에슬리 담바니에샤시야디 카치시에 갑래야 뭐 딘디 밖에 따당거 유르디 지바시나 다 코랑 아니 지 코랑신 요바티리 아니 기베 따당데 메와 컨디스소 투그리세 데르다 데 따당데 다 가도 그찬네 예 그찬네 양지 다 초망보니 따당 셴바지 간 요와 땅에디 같이 시그레스.
In relation to craving or attachment, here, the antidote, it's really has to do with considering how one is perceiving an object. And the point of this mindfulness of the body is to shift the way that we are perceiving this object. So here, in the sense, if we're looking at, we could think maybe a form would be a more appropriate word. If we're thinking about external form, the question arises and the contemplation arises about how do I actually perceive this form? How am I perceiving this shape, this color, and so forth? Is my perception in accord with reality or not? If it is true, then that's not problematic. But if one notices that there is an exaggeration of the qualities of the object, then quite quickly one will realize that we are not perceiving something which is in accord with reality. So, for example, let's say there's a color which, is kind of normally one could say that it's quite a beautiful color, it's a nice color. The exaggeration or the function of attachment will sort of exaggerate and kind of consider this color or this shape as being extremely beautiful. And this sort of extreme attitude is very different from the reality of the situation of what the color truly is, in a sense. And this function of kind of disassociating, kind of disconnecting in a sense with reality is coming from our attachment. So this reflection of mindfulness of the outer, you could say the outer forms, in a sense, is to question one's perception of the outer form, and then on top of that, reflect on how one is interacting mentally with that object. And if one notices that if there is this whole projection which is coming from the side of attachment, and that as a side effect, what will happen is that there's this kind of unbearable feeling of or fear, in a sense, of being separated from the object. One cannot bear being separated from the object because there's this complete sort of exaggeration which is being projected onto this outer form. So mindfulness of the body, in a sense, is a reflection and a questioning, in the sense of one's perception of the object before us, and trying to undo this exaggeration, this sort of extreme this exaggeration or this extreme projection upon the object, whether it's color or shape or whatever it might be. It's a transformation of one's attitude in relation to these objects.
Yeah. TTS ya yo seres sumchido tateri tanda nga sundi deshete zu nga zo senjong tanda di tanda senjong nga jingla juk yani rimbati ma mentuni ro jima loss ti gang le kora rang gang le ya lobsen shi so jongna ti ya yo seres tanga rang samlo ti course ro.
And so really these four mindfulnesses, I think it would be really wonderful if in the future we have the opportunity to explore this lesson, make it a kind of lesson in itself or study in itself, and we'll be able to go much gradually and more deeply into the topic. Whereas here the main focus, I guess, of this class is understanding the mental factors, whereas this other one, if we did the four mindfulnesses, the focus would be on the main mind. So it would be quite good, I think, if we could maybe put some time aside to kind of explore that in greater depth.
Yeah. Karso tanda chamba nyar shaba siya chamba nyar shaba siya donda de ane dudu chik karso ya da ane shuna chamba nyar shaba siya de tan namje kaso ngole nga so chik kache chongre ane chamba siya de tang ane shishin siya de namje nga so de chik ane mitse nangale kase chik kichimbo yimba tang ta te mayimbe soso chasha kandi de chena tele kandi de kichimbo yimba Tikola Kasungole to do Shuayin. Tandan dig, Tramba near Shapase, Tonda Carson, Tramba near Shas at Tilian, and Nambi Tataguanalia, the Shajapani, Jonyore, Jidasha Japani. Tramba near Shapase at the Shetambo de Candres on the Ane Tramba at the top chimbo, Tramba tig, Ane Pegi, Ane Karsutan Zumba was in Anda. Ane pe chimbo yo bati gani chamba nyore shapasi ati deshe japang chikin gure.
Zumba sana? Kira?
Temba top chimbo, temba shik chimbo yo wa. Tanda de pe na nyore shapasi yonde, ko tanye de chongtong de, tambo de tere. Ni ba le yang, ina tate yang, ane nambi tatu ge deshe japang chik che. Tayang na te yang chik tatu kuna le yang. den tigu marda siang tele Geshe Japton nipa de country sonde Chamba Nior Shapa Sionde, Tambo Shirab Kepa Chene, Shirab Gapagi, Ane Karim Maimba, Pagi, Ani Kepa Tata Chetsavi Gilia, that Tamba Ti Gile, and Tamba the Shirab Kepa Kancheba Tikang, Tamba, Ane Muba Shato Go Rezash, Penadama Suchi, Ane Tandandi Kavlenas, Pena Penson Rejana, Masuchi, Ane Sebano and Doshan, Jebe Kavle, Jeza Yertele, Shirab Kepa. Shirab Kepa Chene, Tamuni, Anita Soso Samlo de Anitendo, Kaka, Shago, and only Shirab Kepa Tata Che, T. Gilia, Temba, Tati, Shirab Kepa Chetsavi, Gidelia, Te Temba Tata Simtoya. What Tindish Gang and the Shejava, the Pe Kichishu, the Chagores, thing as Namji Masenolina, Tambo Kari Imba de Kepa Che, Kepa Tata Chetsavi Gilia, Kepan Terchember Chonsavi Gilia, Tati Soso. That's son job was in that tea on the timber, Kazi to Nyartoya. Delia Shijingo and Robache. What the pen Namji touching on the Chawa country Chinayan, the Jayun Yushi. What did you catch it? Gonda des Mambochaso.
And so as for the these four mindfulnesses, and if we look at what they actually refer to, you've probably noticed I've been using these two words interchangeably, the close placement of the mind and the four mindfulnesses. So close placement of the mind is more of a direct sort of literal translation of the Tibetan word or the Tibetan terminology. So what these actually mean, it means it's referring to this kind of association which exists between memory and introspection. And these two aspects of these two mental factors of memory and introspection are very important in our daily life. And in Buddhism, these mindfulness, in a sense, or these close placements of the mind are described in two different ways. There's two sort of main sort of definitions or ways of considering these mindfulness or the close placement of the mind. So the first one, the close placement of the mind is considered as a very sort of powerful, strong memory, in a sense, a very strong capacity of remembrance and holding that in mind, not forgetting. Yeah. So this is the first way that it's considered. The second way that it's considered is that first, within our mind, we go through this process of analysis, and this analysis is done by wisdom. So wisdom is analyzing an object, and once that analysis has come to an end and sort of the answer or the final object becomes clear, memory will then take this object and hold that found object in mind. So memory will kick in after wisdom has done its work of analysis. So, for example, if we have an object of attachment, first wisdom will analyze this object of attachment. And once the analysis has been complete, once the understanding has arisen, memory will then hold on to this understanding and sort of protect that or maintain that awareness. Yeah. So this approach of first analysis of wisdom and then followed by a memory is very useful again in our day-to-day life. We can analyze a situation with wisdom, then come to a conclusion, and then with our memory we will hold this, or we protect this conclusion, we bear it in our mind for as long as possible. And it's important at this point that memory doesn't stand alone. Memory is also accompanied by introspection.
So, ane tatiri tining asu tanda di zankarasu tanda ne sepa sena na do choku thama dilia ta yon tiwa diri le sigirta asu namji ne susu dopa siati ta ane yon delia docha siati sepa sena ta delia chapa se kuni chapa kare yore siashi tini ko samro ko ani chekuri ko tata rishi susu doba chong choku mare doba siati 아니 양치 야샤 야탐바 아니 카르소르 탄당아스 아니 도바시아디양 심 카르소르다 심 마야의 초신한다 야 견지 초레베스나 대양 아니 야샤 야탐바 용고요 말아 대명이 다 텔이야 군인이 잡아 가려 요레시아디양 지발레시 그레스
And so as regards our topic here, which is craving and attachment, I think one question which, or one doubt which might arise is in relation to attachment and having wishes, having particular wants in a sense, yeah? And so I think it's quite an interesting point to reflect upon. How do we, lay the difference, or how do we create a frontier or a barrier in a sense between, our wants and our attachment? Does that mean that all of what we want, all of what we desire is 100% negative? And I think that, so this is not the case, and I think this is an interesting question to explore.
Yeah, the Kablian Tachik and the Kuni Chabakare Resiate, then the Tambo de Roina, Ane Kande Resionde, Chick Pagi Yurtela Mune, Dobasia the Condition Resionde, Ko Yurtula Mune, so te and Chick Topas in the Tumdos and Ane Rando. Ani ti kolia tabshi chenge shikroa ate chikko ngachu ko de wonde shina tingi par tinga goya shire shasi ar shingroa o tindi shi chene tele ya ani chik te tondo nyenke toinyek o tindi ge senjong o tindi shi lian domba se tindi shires doba se.
And so as for wants, in a sense, so if we start to explore the difference, between wanting and being attached to something, so the way it can be defined is that first, this mental factor of wanting, will have an object. It'll have this, and then following this perception of this object, there will be this want to obtain it. I want this object. There's this wish to obtain it for oneself, and then following this kind of this want to obtain something, one effort is then put in place in order to be able to achieve that object.
Tadebe ane karso ta namyang soso chi karso te shurya en toba menjo hasho de katina soso le goyan roshi ane de shondo mebal kansile ngen namyang te pa chi soso be lagba le yosha rosi na ta shur chi me se shingoro ta soso le chi mo dindi ge te la namyang kan jar mendo be namba chi mo dindi ge korangi rangshin de de dindi chagores senjong de ane telen jando me be senjong shi.
And as for a craving and attachment, it is a mental factor which perceives an object, and the perception of the object is imbued with this attitude of never wanting to lose this object. I could never let go of this object. It's almost like if we were holding it in our hands and we would never want to let it slip away. So there's I want to never be separated from this object. So this is the sort of the approach of or the mental attitude of the mental factor of craving and attachment.
Tade korong ranshin ro te che tade gang le yang tene kare yor sen ya don ro mambo shi ta tele kanno mambo che ne jinsen ro ta jinsen ma cho mambo ni so jinsen mambo shi ta ne ya kanno ro che an de che we kable yang ta chu so so le kyong gru mambo shi yong gwe yo wa de yang na me tang ni na me ro cha kwe shik chim bu shi cha de shen ba jön che na me chi chan ro tin ri cha gres.
And so this is the nature, in a sense, of craving and attachment. And now the next thing that it does, in a sense, this craving and attachment, is that it's going to start to add a vast amount of qualities and project these qualities onto this object. And then on top of that, the other, or not really on top of it, but the other side of attachment and craving is that it's going to start to disregard, ignore, neglect any kind of fault which might come about, which might exist within that object. Sorry.
Tene ane chik tindi chik lo de shik chimbo le ka le ata chik zambo cho da ngembi cho se de karemba ye wa kora che ma shia so tindi cha tamala ya da chik ya tu song da ma so mong ba se sho mong be wang ge chong sha ya ane tindi cho mong ba ji ta ma to ya de cho chik ma to.
And so what tends to happen after this is that because this our mind is so the attachment in our mind is so strong, the mind is not able to differentiate between the positive and between the negative, is unable to see the difference between the good side and the bad side of something. And this is really fundamentally rooted in ignorance. And because of this attitude, which is unable to differentiate, the mind becomes completely biased.
Yeah. 다이나 당은 아주 니고야 찍려야 다 지금 야차 야탐바 티 지게니 좀 바시그레베세나 안테온 아니 아주 아니 지 세바그레데 야차 야탐바 좀 그레베세나 딘디요 아니 커서 야차 야탐바 레세야 딘디가니 아니 랍터요 마르스타테 쭉 간레레세인데 쭉데 간사 코랑게 아니 쭉 간사 될은 저 차대야시 베나다지 맞죠 소소 무슨 나래나요 데코 아니 삼다다지나 고 무슨 나래요 고 다랑 아니 지 맞죠 고양 고야시 고디 이 가르저로 지 무슨 나래 벤도 몸보시 접토야 딘디 기차네요 콜레 여된 기차야 다용 자세 자탐바 좀 바시기르베잖아 좀 바식 마임바 소소게 아니 지 맞죠 지 잘하지 마서는 소소 배교 간데 제토마토스 해리 중거라 딘디 지 삼로 당아요 그래서
Kyun bashik tela kare sepa tan chakpa yang ne tela kare dopa tela.
dan 세바데 잡아서 하시도
Tela
어디
na.
엔도 강에 메르베서 야데 자차 자탐바다 직 데르베스나 디르 마레세 데
So, and so, are we, I think a question which might come about is wondering whether, craving and attachment is 100% of a negative mind. And it's not actually something that we can say that it's 100% bad or 100% negative in that sense. It's really important to understand that craving and attachment are really rooted in the person, and they're really connected to the individual in a sense, and that it has to do with how one is relating to the object which is in front of themselves. So if one is able, in a sense, to use in our everyday life, we need to be able to respond to our needs. We need to be able to eat, food. We need to be able to wear, correct clothes, appropriate clothes, and so forth. So it's very important that we sort of analyze our attitude and very much we're not able to say that all of these objects are negative, or we can't say that craving and attachment are 100% negative, because actually with these different objects, we would be able to not only meet our own needs, but also bring benefit to others.
아니 다티 콜이야 베나 다치 아니 남비 따접거네 상가도 딘디고 베 냠렘 받센 통보 딘디고 아니 딘디고 있나요 단다 아니 지 맞죠 베네 컨데어스는 베나스 단다디 세바 참모르 베 아니 가르소라 셈베 참모 쉬고 강래야 아니 딘디고 아니 세바르 아니 양테 람고모 파주르니 코랑게 딘디요 여기 아니 가르소라 아니 이 동반이 유르트 제바보다 유르 샴바 딘디요 아니 시럽 그 조신조 토야 뭐 딘디 체네요 고 아니 디 소소를 쯤메와 강야 쯤메아다 안데 마세 티치요 여된 그 초래에 줄토야 다 소소 냠렘바 딘디나요 딘디 강네요 아니 데시치 용고르스
And so why am I saying is this: if we think about, for example, in Buddhist tradition, and more specifically within the Tantric tradition, when it comes to attachment, attachment is going to be used on the path of practice. And so the mind of attachment, this craving mind, is kind of brought down to its very, very, very subtle level. So a very subtle craving mind is then transformed into the path of practice. And so as this mind, this very subtle mind of craving is used and transformed into the path of practice, it is then associated with the wisdom realizing emptiness. It is associated with wisdom in general. And so such a practitioner, which is actually involves quite a high level of practice, but in that sense, their attachment and their craving, not only is it not faulty, but they've transformed it into something which has numerous qualities in that sense.
Yeah, but 딘디 릭데 양치 아니 지금 당보 양케세는다 리 당보 와서 딘디 제시 마레스 베트가 냠랭 친 톰보야 레상게 딘디 아니 지금 대시 잡당시레 마도 양테 아니 가르소르 지 로병 당보 제와세는다 아니 양치 곰당 냠랭 센더다 지 네세 마모르벤나네 티카차데 용고 마레스 미시게 nga choga tumbu kache shire mato tanda ane chik ane docho se sole ya ti namsha de ne shira lego mares.
And so when we're talking sort of these explanations, they will not be presented in sort of beginners, sort of either meditation or beginners teachings or explanations. This sort of presentation and explanation is associated to very advanced practices. It is a practice done by very advanced practitioners. And so it is in that sense a special explanation, which we will not find in any of the sutra tradition.
So, ane tatini tanda di lobsen senata senjong di kole yang misi tanda tikon rena teche te kasimena ngasu ane tanda senyu tike nipa kontro se di kon mandwe is.
And so does anybody have any questions regarding the mental factors here? If not, we shall move on to anger.
Yeah. Loud.
When you talk about in Tantra, when you talk about transforming attachment and craving, is it spoken about in the same way as lowering? Like, are you speaking about the minds and mental factors, or are you speaking about it on something on a more subtle level?
Okay. Gena kirantigi sepa tang dojani te lama mare lam ngo du gurne tigi kare ngak nang lola tende nyamlen teni yonggerwa ani te deshe te so yang koranzo sem tang semjung tigi namsha tende shagiore yang koranzo sembe chamo tigi tingne ani lama kare lam ngondu gurya chetanti sem tang semjung tende tigi namsha tende shagi mare kande ina koranzo yang ngak nang lola sem tang semjung tende shagamena shagiyana
That chikwa chikyang shwa sen dang sen jung nam sha se den do da nga ni ga chaba kang yung ko mare tanda nga su chik ane tanda seba den do cha su sen jung nam ba sen jung se ya di ane de she jap kan to na chikwa chikyang se ko chikwa sen jung rang ngo ji che gre ma do ane do cho nga chu ni ga de ane sem se ya shi ka cha mare ina lam ga na ba ju gre se de lam de le yang in zu sem chang ba ing go mare sem dang sen jung chang ma lam ga na ba ju ya ma bo yo re sendan senjong ani lamgung yerbisenanta lam yengke ani semdan senjong sama yong chogore tiongde nga chogele yang tantan zuti lamgun namba jugre la onde yang chi simzi yingwa ndo kachamare lam la mingo ze kache yomares
la società lam la du guriate yang sem yang yongyore direwa
nime yingore senjong yingore koran ani pena seba ni lamgun jur sona seba dan chongdan de yombe nyam de yongge tu sem e nyam de senjong jamba sama lamgun namba jutu.
Lasso. And so whether it's in the tantras or in the sutras, the division of the main minds and the mental factors are the same. So there won't be any sort of difference in that sense. So the identification, how we identify a mental factor, how we identify craving or attachment or any of the other mental factors will be done in the same way. And when we talk about bringing these mental factors, for example, bringing attachment on the path, it's not necessarily mainly the mind. It can also, also the mental factors will be brought onto the path of practice. So it will be the mental factors along with the different sort of compatible characteristics of the main mind, which will come along through this transformation. So it's both. It can be applied to both. The transformation or bringing to the path of practice is applied to the main mind as well as the mental factors, and there is no difference within the sutra tradition or in the tantra tradition. It's the same.
Yeah, ane te kandere sin pena nga su kazang ta tangmo ne nga su de she khar jari sin nga su chik sem kata shiba ze ga shi chik ba imba kan shi la ane chele zentang ga ni ane yaoi cho da kyung cho ni ka chong re zen de she chik te ka cha ta tema tambo nga su ni ka che chong imba o de che on de kandere se on de ane tanda nga su chik lam go yaoi cho le de she ane do yi kable na pena parchun trick se anda wata ane ta chi ane ta chini chamba da ning ji se so changma de senjong go changba re senjong ri changjang re so changma senjong rang re ina lam yimbo senjong inga tindi ge thara namba ane mambo shi yong re te na sing ge chi ta nga so nyomong ge cho se an de she ja changma senjong changba re i ge nyembo ri changma senjong changba senjong 장바 고요. 주셈 세야된 아니 코르시다 니바 메조르시 코론토가 열라 파카 초아 점렘바도 코론 니바 요마다 고야 야이 초다 티 드웨 초라 티 마트제데 센종디 에치야마 아니 칼로 줄도야디시 어디라는데 센종레 야디니가 용고요레스.
And so it's something that we discussed initially when we were discussing the mind. The mind, the main mind, has this function of sort of holding or sort of perceiving an object. And so when we talk about bringing to the path of practice or bringing, sort of, engaging in an excellent path of practice or bettering our mind in the sense, and when we try to better our mind, we try to engage in this sort of spiritual transformation and engaging in this path of practice. This means engaging in the 6 parameters. This means engaging in developing compassion. This means engaging in developing love and kindness. So all of these, when we engage in this path of practice, this is all mental factors. This is not none of these are main minds. All the things that we are developing, are actually mental factors. And it's the same when we think of all of the disturbing emotions in our mind. All of these are mental factors. And funnily enough, all of the antidotes of the disturbing emotions are all of the antidotes of the disturbing emotions are mental factors as well. So the main mind is, in a sense, is kind of powerless, actually, whether it's going to the, to a virtuous side or to a negative side. It's kind of being dragged here and there by mental factors. So it has, in this sense, a very little power, the main mind, and it's the mental factors which are much more active in that sense.
Maybe is. Okay,
I guess if there's no other questions, we shall continue.
I have one question, Geshe.
Okay.
Does attachment to view is also considered a mental factors or exaggeration in some way?
Attachment to view, is it a mental factor? Yeah.
Can we? It means the antidote to it is that when we practice the 6 parameters, so if it's what is being said, then we can follow the 6 parameter path to actually slowly reduce the attachment to the view. That's my question.
Okay. Again la ngatso ti tawa la susu tawa chi den chi la chakpa. Tawa zimba tawa chakpa susu tawa chocolate tende chik chakpa tende yong sigirwa ani tende chik la semchung jebe khande yina tarba mare tawa susu tatang de la tawa tawa la chakpa
re that's some senjong
so you attachment to your view is or attachment to a view is indeed a mental factor. Yes.
Yeah. Pena so tawa so lang cho se so yang chi de le yang ma zo xiu tang ma zo rang xing ge de yu do ni sam se se na ni tawa de yak shu yin se shi ta so kar se na so zawa so chi kar so da ma zo ji rang jing ge hin ji zi ji kan de yo se na ane Geshe tamba so de pena chi tawa yin ya nor me josh yang tak pa shi ba ane chu pena chi ta tan gulo ji na so de zang shu ge gulo de so de kwen shi na e gar ma so rang jung ge so de ane ti ya pugle ya ten do na ane karche ne jong de ta chi Paja chumbo salodan zambule gana ta chi yakshu de soso imbanchi ranjing le udo ranjing le ti wanga tene soso de yakshu chasa de soso ga tawa soso ga ta khari na chama yang ta bacha ane soso ga tawa le ya tamze shik chimuchi ti namya log me se shingurwa ti chakpe wanga se na ta ko sepa se na da counter telpe tambo shu zum to yashi odozo ganga senjong yongcho guresti.
And so an example of this would be when we think of my idea, or my idea is the best, and what I think is so wonderful, is so precious, and we have this kind of natural sort of relation, in a sense, to to our ideas and to our views in this way. And we think that when we perceive something, we're seeing the thing crystal clear, there is no mistakes, also the clothes that we wear, they are the cleanest, they are the best. And we have this kind of natural sort of relation in a sense with ourselves. And so we can, why is it that my idea is the best? Because, I am the most important person in this world, And so because I'm the best person in this world, then my view and my attitude or my ideas are the best as well. They are authentic, they are correct, they are valid. And because they are, correct and valid, I never want to let them go. And never wanting to let them go, this is when we can notice this mental factor of attachment or sort of craving to our view in that sense. And so this is indeed a mental factor.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, to Geshe.
야, 안에 다 되는 거죠. 안에 다 니바데, 전혀 적는 거 컨트롤해야 돼. 컨트롤해야 돼. 컨트롤해야 돼. 다. 양당은 즉 네. 다 강게야 대시 강게 생존데 되지나 소소고 파쇼 이어들 빼 타녀보다 쉬웠다토에 방금 아주 강래야. 잡아 컨트롤을 제qab려야. 다 컨트롤해야 돼. 텔레 도초듯이 다 파쇼 가리는 이어들당 즉 그게 아니 즉 가르다 태송네 대당 배전에 즉 타녀보 준도 매한듯이 배대 대다 장랑데 세는다 강다 딘디그 아니 생존식 강랜데 시작하고다.
And so now moving on to the next mental factor, which is anger, a way which will help us to understand what anger is that we can think of it as being the complete opposite in the sense of attachment. So attachment had this perception of the object of feeling so close to the object, being, never wanting to be separated from it, and completely the mind and the object being very, very, very close and very adoring in the sense of that object. So this is the mental factor of attachment. Anger is the opposite of that. There's this kind of attitude in the sense that the mental factor of anger never wants to be close to that object, whatever the object might be, is never want to be near it.
Yeah. That indeed that control the Munzimbe Kablia Ane Tati Chik Nambi Tatab Gani Kande Rezonde Koranga Muir Carrese Muba Carrese Tigani Chikche Tela Muni ta Korangi and Nambas and Zentan Korangi Pa Nichik Chile the country Chirese or the Nambani Gani de Shijawore. Tikablia Muba Sumingure Mubasum. That in Mubasum Chiglegres Mubasum Telia Muni Tak Chikazor Teleam and the Mazobasion de Mazota Chik Zoban Gum Matoya. Tindi and Saint John. And Zoba Gomato at some the Mazeta Carceres on the Kunin nursing basion, the Pagilia Yachatambachi Chik Saint John de Gelindos and other social Sablonale, and nobody go to some Tindi and the Chik Saint John. That then the Kedan in Matsu Massinale, young de or so Magas as she let Tele Magas as she the Tion de Tele Zobanam Gomatoya. Zoba Gomato at some the Maze. Ane telepachi no bache gonda samba te ngaso chi ranjong ngaso ani samlo senanda ani soso nim nyere choi na la mambo ji tegora ta tinde ani samlo khoya chashi de karre jonde ta tin nambi ta ru ganse tela control secreta se control se.
And so the first sort of step in understanding this mental factor of anger comes to identification. So the way we identify anger is through its object. So what is the object of anger? Secondly, its aspect, which is relating to how anger perceives or holds this object. And thirdly, it's its function, what it does. Yeah. So there are three different objects of anger. And what happens is that when we encounter these objects and the mental factor of anger is at work, there is this sort of unbearable aspect. Something is unbearable for us in relation to these objects. We lose patience. We're no longer able to be patient. And on top of losing patience, there is this wish to harm. There's this idea which, one must harm, one must eliminate, in a sense, this experience. And so this is something that I think we're probably quite familiar with in our everyday life, that when we see somebody or we encounter somebody we don't like, quite quickly we become impatient with them, and then following that we wish to harm them. And this is a kind of, unfortunately, a natural process which arises. And this experience, this process, this sequence in Buddhism is defined as anger.
Yeah. Then pena chi penso no shana pena so jando tindi tizilia ane begin toyon de pe something yut mo pe gatsun de menjo telan chi magawando tindi chi tong ane ten tong ma je ti samlo de tindi samlo de kiyon de ke pe chi semlia ane chi karzur shiva chun de menjo zebi nambachi ane se shi to pe ke shidendo kan menjo shi pena mi chi so so le chi 아니 뜻이 Geshe 땅에서 만지와 직접으로 대해서인데 남사고 직 텔레 야랜드 지역의 직 삼로대 삼로치 가서다 니 지금 눈체가 나빠져서 뭐라 노바치가 나빠 뭐 딘디시 개용한테 딘디시 직계 증계의 세난다 강당 아주 삼로대 뒤초래 친정계의 추친계의 세난다 대생종의 가르에서한테 컨트롤해야 돼 딘디시 맞죠 뒤 초래파 소성 삼로 코너 뒤고를 틴도 계시도와 어때래 생존되는 아니 컨트롤해야 돼.
An example of this is when we encounter our enemy or somebody that we dislike, the way we perceive them, the way they appear to us is being generally ugly. They have an unpleasant appearance, or they look horrible in a sense. And so this is the way we're perceiving them. And then behind that, the way that we're thinking about them, or the way we're relating to them, is in a very unpeaceful manner. So there is a kind of an absence of peace within our mind, and on top of that, there is a very kind of horrid attitude, a kind of harmful attitude, and this comes out quite clearly in our words. You know, if we come to speak at that point, then our words will be quite harsh, they'll be quite rough, and because of this intent behind to harm, there's this motivation to harm, and this, you know, what is bringing us to think about the other in that way, and what is bringing us to perceive the other in that way, is this mental factor of anger.
Yeah. That in the Korea, the control make up Lea, move out the Lea, some she legres, some says, that is some the countries on the Tandang Mumba Kundina Lea, and a control Kamashinas and Inema, Tandati, Muba number some day, Muban the Shikavi Kalia, Mubalia, Saint Jen Chicken Chogore, and a Dungal Zet, Tindi Chicken Gores. 아니 딩얼지다 내세는다 딘디 추제 단 카운터 센젠다 딩얼다 추제 섬데 무바샤 그레스
추는 라비아테티 치땅기 추르와
추세야데 단디 골만 디시지경데 센젠다 아니 센젠세야데 소소레 타다비스는다 딘디 소소 통대에 아니 샴바르기 때 직체 년코나 소소 직 좋아 아 딩마르세야데 소소게 아니 란주게 딩마 삼살레 딩마 초아 딩마노 식침을레 온데 텔레 컨트롤사야 지금부터 데니 추세야데 다가지 추사 마임바 페나 지 소소라 노바치야 그 페나 촌당 딘디그르기 뜻소리야 에지 타네 총사가 삼살은 아주 다 아니 소소다와 지 가르서르다 아니 조탄 데탄 마시니 지 람사 소소리 지 아니 지 가서로 지 샴바질 특도야도 당 딘디 채널 람사 딘디 강래 롱라에 딘디 친구도 모두 당 소소라 노바 시행게 그다지 봐서 너제 그 주간의 지나 어디서 강래 공조사야
라소 So like I mentioned just previously, anger has three main objects, and these three main objects are presented in the Abhidhamma. The first object of anger will be sentient beings. So this refers to any other sort of sentient being in a sense, or just sentient beings in general, okay? The second object is suffering. So this will be this experience of suffering, this feeling of suffering that one experiences. And the third one is it would be sort of a phenomena, and it's not any old phenomena, you could say. It falls into the category of phenomena of which harm us in our sense. So it might be weapons, it might be spikes, it might be thorns. So something which, when it, it's kind of hurting us in a sense. So this will be the third object in which the third object of anger. Sorry.
Yeah. 아니 간다 가르스네 돔로 가르자셔스나 다치 수술이 셴베 소데 단다 센첸스야다 다 수술이 녀거네 요데야다 다치 남기 데레도 마술이 진 종지 용케 냠데 콘트로사디아시마토 수술은 제가 촌네메게 타렘보 슈용게 딘디실이야 마스 콘트로사디아시고마도 강던디 당보데 수술이 녀거네 직 수술이 녀거네 요샤에 수술 직 마가사게 단다 소덴거리 딘디 직체 다니바데 초와랑가 강레데 시적으로 초와대한 초와 딩을 때려야 랑적게 소소 길라용게 그시시그래 소소 길라용게 초와 강레 아니 콘트로자야 다 선바데 데시 장원데 센체 마임바 초와에 마임바 다 취응우보 대한 소소레 노바체 딘디 단도 드나 딘디 섬거 강레 콘트로자가 두세 tel라고다 다 딘디 섬거 강레 콘트로자운데 다 자고이 다 진생 가려요레세운데 다 아니 센젠스야 디강레 콘트로자 아니 데시제 갑레야 안테 진세 마 용거레 코응알라 노바체서 코응알라 카체 디차랍선 타카리네 진세 마보지 강더 코야 진세 마보지 시에 용거와 다 초와 강레 데시제 온다 초와 딩네지 소소 질라지 온데 다데 초와 딩네데 마즈니 소소 텔야체 돈네데 쳔바토 초와 딩네데서 다데 강로노나니 다데 직 소소 다 선바든도에나 진센 아니 만체 진짜 사니 menjon 지레데나 가서데 진센데 메아도 마통네 아직 수수 페나 컴바 포당듯이 만드네 돈도실레 컴바 식침부 잡잖아요 논정 원이시네 수수를 논정 여르데 롱랑세데 파시 아니 도도다 신도 칸터 카리나 테나지 아직 삼성은 아주지 아니 가서를 다시 야랑당 만디가도 딘데용 그 소소 응권도 있는 이게 기콘도 다베 가리나 때 눈치 챙게 원이데 세레선이 소소로 하티나 롱데 소소 컨트롤을 사고요래 파쇼 이르데 컨트롤세 다데 저지 인생 사와니 메와 관실에 인생 많통니 인생데 인생 단다 메와 마세 요바야 줬다니 그 강는 온라인 파쇼 잘라디 강래 어디지 차디도
And so, in relation to these three objects upon which anger is generated, so let's go back to the first one, which is sentient beings. So sentient beings, it will be, it's also sentient beings in a sense that we are close to, that we're connected to, that are present in our lives. It won't, we don't get angry against or with somebody which is very, very, very kind of sort of dissociated with our lives. It has always to do with people which are very much connected to our daily lives. And so these objects or these sentient beings will be people which we dislike, that we don't, we simply dislike in that sense. The second one in relation to feeling, the second object of anger, is in relation to this feeling of suffering within our mind. So it's a very much an internal experience. It's a suffering which occurs within our own mind. The third one is not sentient beings and is not feelings, and it has to do with external objects or external phenomena. And what is quite interesting to explore is to think about the reason why we become angry in relation to these three objects. So sentient beings, we might get angry with sentient beings because, we think, oh, he harmed me or she harmed me or they said this and they said that, etc. So because of this, anger will generate in our mind. The second, the reason for why we get angry with feelings of suffering is because this experience of suffering that we're undergoing is simply unbearable for us. It's unbearable and we're not able to be patient with it and go through it. And so because of this lack of patience, we become angry in relation to that feeling of suffering. The third one, which in a sense is quite interesting because, other sort of phenomena in a sense, because there's no real reason. It'll be like, for example, you're walking along a path and it happens that you knock your foot or you trip over, and you hurt yourself in that sense. So we tend to get angry with the rock or the stone or the tree or whatever it might be. So or for example, we get up and we knock our head or we bang our head on the window or on the door or whatever. So there's no real reason that we have, and it's our own mistake. It's our, we were unaware, so we fell over and we knocked our head or so forth. But we project, we're pretending as if there was a reason to be angry onto this object, when it's actually our own fault that, this experience of suffering has come about. So this third one, which is with external phenomena, we're unable to see that there's no real reason to be angry in that situation. We project, we pretend as if there was a reason. And actually, if we start to question the reason, we see that it's actually our own mistake. So, this last category is quite peculiar in that sense.
Yeah, me tatindi chik tatu gani deshe jebe kabla penata nga chik soso kondro sasa shamba ta chik ane ta chik senchen dishina soso nyengkor na yonge penata chik kansa sundishikina soso le noba ndo pena tsuk tsapo shikilamna ta nga so tanta di kansa di gane ne kondro sa gorwa namsa kondro sa kongal tsik tsapo lapsumsi ta ngone ge ta chik shirab ge jepa che ngone kondro sa ye kabla nga so namsa kondro sa ndo tindi jepa che ya se namsa se tsama pa yigne namsa ko ti gang le yala lang de shingurwa ta ina ngone jepa chena kondro sa sa ngone de karisha se terta ngone tarab gane chi nambi nyalen ba de so ne chi namja de she ta japtang da ane nyamlen ba ane chi nyamle chetang garamba gando na ta ngone no ba chenke de srisha se terta ti tiwa de ta ma so pena chi ko chi tsapo shi lamna chi tsapo lam kai de ngone no ba chenke ngone de dikya ngone de khore de kansa de rendu remadu 가르치는 직접 올라가게 나오는데 파쇼대야 논라인데 파쇼대야 컨트롤사대오라 다 간다 코야 컨트롤사네 직접 보시면 소리 쓸랍 직접 보시 나오는데 가서야 컨트롤사 다 컨트롤상게 니냠 티 간다 컨트롤 찍된 ngola 파쇼 직접 남게 ngola 컨트롤사 소소 디 줄레 컨트롤상게 니냠 티 다데나 소소야다 아니 집어지장 뒤자 차사로 다 간다 뭐니 시나 집어지장이다 당원이 있나 다 가르쳐야 돼. 야 퉁도나 다 타마 쟁게도 컨트롤해야 돼. 컨트롤 되면 돼. 컨트롤 되게 안에 파쇼 메인한다 수수이나 심건 찍자게도 컨트롤해야 돼. 다 컨트롤 컨디션 해야 되다. 안에 컨트롤 해야 돼. 컨디션에 컨트롤 관이 총해야 돼. 야야 된도나 당은서 남기 있다. 즉 마시바 몽바세 디 왕게 다 컨트롤제 컨트롤 왕게 컨트롤 왕은 맞춘도 맞추기 전에 다 놓바치야. 딘디 그 여름 지기 용거와 다이나 대조 지 남상 아주 지 삼로당 토세야다 가보 차고라다 뭐에 내세는 뭐니다 뭐에 내세는 다가랑 데리죠.
If we think about anger with this approach of Buddhist philosophy, the object of anger is a very important aspect to analyze. So, for example, if we think about a sentient being, so this first object, the first object of anger, which we just explored, it's sentient beings which are close to us. It'll be, for example, a person which comes about and insults us. And, they say, I don't know, they'll start insulting you in that sense. And so at that point, although, in Buddhist philosophy, you've probably heard, and then with wisdom, you analyze the situation. It's at that point when you hear that insult, that sets you off on it. You become angry, and forget about any kind of analysis. You're just fully sort of sucked into this, insult and completely involved with your anger at that point. And so a practitioner, they'll have a slightly different approach. Once sort of anger arises in the mind, what they will do is that they will start to analyze the object, and they will start to think, who has actually harmed me? What is actually this real reason why my anger is being generated in my mind? Is it the person who has insulted me? Is it the words which were used? What could it actually be? And so if one starts to analyze the situation, what becomes clear is that there is one person, which has become angry, and which has insulted me in that sense, yeah? And so they've insulted me, which has then made me angry, you know? So in the end, we just have two angry people which have gotten together in that sense. And, you know, it's kind of a depressing situation. There's one person who's gotten angry, who's insulted another person, who's made the other person angry. And so fundamentally, these two people, whether it's the person who is insulted or the person who's being insulted, they're fundamentally in the same situation. You know, the root of what has created this situation to come about is the same. They're both anger. Yeah. And so the point here is to be able to identify, where is this anger coming from? What is the source of this anger? Why has it come about? How has it come about? And so the source of the anger here really has to do with this not knowing, yeah, which is referring to this fundamental root of the afflictions, which is ignorance. And because there is ignorance, you know, anger can arise, and we completely sort of invest our energy and follow this stream of thought of anger. And so, but it's very, very difficult to sort of have this reflection that the practitioner has, because, you know, when we are involved with our anger, we're very much disconnected from reality.
Yeah, ane pena dachi penzondra sana namjinga suchi ane yanchi pasho mide lamkedi chapra shiwa tangado lamkedi chi ziboyina karina lamkedi pena mi pasho de chi ta karzoro ta shibaranshi manebasina da chi nyomba de chi mi chi tangboni ngozina pasho de ta chi nepando tindi chi pe soso namje chi sim madea ro tindi chi imba chi ke soso ngene hako 하고 강실라 코에 지금 맞춰를 가르랍잖아. 당가 쯧티 농는 거면도 고강나. 다고 가르치는 그런 셈감 남기 특 된 것이 요래서 하는지 수수응애니 하고 살. 하고 자운데 다 konto sago mare karchensa ko koran semde madde ban jiyo bade ngone hago sare hago e kableya te ngoso ko gande chi labsana ten ta mata kharlamna no ne gome do tate tani jena ngaso tindish ta thogu yore sama ngaso ngoni chi deshe jamdana tanda ngaso che namje senka madde ba ta chi nyomba se sik ten digo na mena akomaso donda garan shipa ranshin shipa namji soso shipa ranshin tata shi ne thuyo mare se ante shi nambi tarab kan de she jamna terita ta de donda kare se onde ngaso sem ga ranshin ngona ti ngoni pege ane tsama changjang de ane pechu che ma thoya o tineji kan ma pam thoyo ne ane ngaso changma nyoba do shire ta counter ko de she japtan chik gani dona 상마 nyomba dhawore, inaya ta nyomba impate chik peke ten mantong onde ta ngone semkon trik deore, semkon trik chikpa chijangre ta ko semkon trik deore, semkon trik nin tamata sik tsupo lago yore, paya long tengo yore, tseya long tengo yore, ina ta kantar sembe rangshin ngone ta ne matho ne. Cho chine ta na nyomba re la na dhikor ta ko 상마 ngaso dangshin 상마 nyomba de cha. ina nyomba yemba de ngo ma shi yong de lamsa no la gdo ta pe na nyomba ta ge nyomba ngoni shi le nyomba yemba ngo shi ka no aso ko karlam na aso no la gdo ta tenda wa shi ta to go yi ngoni chena ta ngoni shi mi de ka me sa san korang ge samno tik de ore se ya shi ge ti rangshin de ta to na ana aso control ta mambo shi ba rangshin ge ani ka so nyori to ya shi gdo wa ti shi de shi ane namji tatangani dindri jinde sheji kyagre.
And so an example of this would be if we think about a person which insults us, but this person is maybe unwell, maybe, you know, they have some, you know, how to say, mentally they might be unstable, or they might have some kind of, you know, disease in that sense. So if such a person insults us, you know, we kind of know better than to get angry, because we know their context, we know where they're coming from, we know that they're unwell, we know that they're unstable, and it's not really them which is speaking in a sense, yeah? And so it would be really good if we were able to see all of these, you know, sort of all sentient beings in that way, to consider them as being unwell, as being unstable. And it's not really them who's talking, because fundamentally, when we look at our mind and the quality and the nature of our mind, you know, which is clear and pure, this is applicable to all sentient beings. But the thing is that as sentient beings, we're not able to remain connected to that nature. We're not able to remain in that balance of clarity and purity of the nature of the mind, and we're not able to use it. Yeah. And so in that sense, there's not really a big difference between, somebody who's mentally unstable and oneself. In that sense, we are all crazy. And, the thing is that we are completely unaware of our own craziness. We're not able to see that we're crazy, that we're sick in that sense. And because we don't see that, we see things and we see people and we shout at him, we shout at her, we get angry for various reasons. And we're not truly able to connect with the clear and pure nature of our own mind. It's very important that we're able to identify, to know that we are unwell, in the sense that we are crazy, and to recognize that that is our situation. Because the same way as when we perceive somebody who is unwell, who is mentally unstable, and who shouts at us or insults us, we're able to not become disturbed and not generate anger. If we had that attitude towards all sentient beings, it would also reduce our disturbed mind and also reduce our anger.
Yeah. Ane tatindi tachi kontro ane jewa jidishe jabe kable yang tanda ane gange ganto senjen se shwa telema ane deshe shwe kable yang tanda ndog nalma ane tindi ane jinsen tang de jinsen dele yang ane junsen good shi tang ne tati ane tanda di ane 소소래 노바 아니 제땅데 콘로 사땅게 유름싱고라 텔레양치 다총르지 마소나 진세 그치가네 콘로스 랑게 요레시아시 딘데시주.
And so within when we get this presentation of getting angry in relation to sentient beings, in relation to this object of sentient beings as being the object or the topic of our anger, in the sutra, it is this development of anger is presented within 9 reasons. So there's 9 reasons why anger is related. So there are 9 reasons why anger is generated within our mind in relation to sentient beings.
Yeah. Te kabla ta khande re sengde ta soso le jinsen soso gang le ngala no pa chi songsi ane dibi ne kabla ya ngole ya ngama do ko ngala no pa chi songsi yana tata nga no pa che gu se tata rang gang ni sablo chi tang ko yana mama balan ting ngala no pa che ta tende re sha se ji nguro ta mama ba jinse chang ni o dine gang ni ane namba sam chi ta che te na jing ta soso gasa soso ni ta ina cho mo ina ta soso pama ina kanta ta soso ta kari na yong chure soso tan je yo te la yang chi ba chi kyang ko ngole no ba che song tan da che du ma ba che gre sha se ni sing gro tin di ta tang kon ro za tang teni simba de do cho de kan de na soso ga cha chi na soso ma ga se shi na soso ma ga sa de le ya ane ko de le ya po che song se 소소 마가사실 미직 약보치는 양 소소 논라 해쇼 코 ngama 약보체송 단답에 약보체기도세 양 논라 아니 마음바량 콜야 펜토게도스 콜 펜토가 두위도세 하시고라 뭐 딘데네 진세 good 강니 아니 디시주레.
So there are 9 reasons explained in the sutras as for why anger arises, yeah. And so these 9 reasons are as follows. So the first 3 reasons are associated with the self, with I, and so it will be this stream of thought, which will be he hurt me, yeah, or she hurt me, they hurt me, and it might be first in the past. They hurt me in the past. They are hurting me now. And they will hurt me in the future. So here are the 3 reasons as to why one develops anger, yeah? So it's associated with oneself. The second reason is associated with one's close ones. It could be one family, one friends, or anybody one appreciates, yeah? So it would be, they or somebody harmed, my dear, close friend, for example. They harmed them in the past, they are harming them currently, and they will harm them in the future. So this is another one of the 3 reasons why one develops anger. The third sort of category, yeah, is in relation to enemies, yeah. So it will be, for example, somebody's benefited my enemy, or something has, helped or benefited my enemy in the past. They're helping them now, and they will certainly help them in the future. So these are 3 more reasons as to why one develops anger.
Yeah. 다 대소제데 아니 다 남진 와서 직 마치 가서라 다 니레 최나래야 공도 사탕들이 사고다 아시안데 시치레다데 돈당로데 아니 디니지 진센들이 강네 진들이실라 뭐네세 데 남진 와서 마세나네 직 니레 최나래 공도 사탕이 게름 직체 다이나 디 갑려야 모네잖아 소소세야 직체 데니양 소소가 니 소소 자세 예양도 소소 당보관이 소소가 삼로나래 인지 숨치사다 소소의 자와 치쇼치 디니바데 소소 니엔다 소소 직 제요데체 다 타마데래야 소소 마가사 자세 디직 당원이 따집강니 직다니 남비 따집당 심거르바강니 데시숑데 아니치 탐실래야 니그랑시 따고레랑데 아니 직 상마데 닝그랑시 임바 직바레 샤세시 응으로와 다대양 기억 앞세당 딘지강니 지고요레 다드서양 지마 직양아서 마음발에양 디강니 데시엔데시에 종나 아니 지 기억 앞치요바 두 기억 앞치요바 두 토요나 디니티 제네 소설이야 아니 직 펜토베랑신 소설에 자충부임바 친디의 소설 닌당 직바직장 직디송 앞setsam마도 소설에 펜토바 직바직장 요아가 디강리 기억합치 위질레티니 안에 디질이야 가르소를 탄다 안에 상마 년기랑시 따당시 단다 아니 롭센세난다 딘디가 아니야 고 냠링 그럼바 망보시 되시요래 도소양당가 소지마로 총나 디체치로.
And so these explanations about how anger arises is a very sort of classic explanation in relation to our daily life and how anger arises in our daily life. But for anger to arise in our daily life, it's very important that we understand that initially within our mind, we have these divisions, these kind of categories, which we've created in our mind in way we perceive and we categorize other sentient beings. So first there's I, which is like the most important. Then we have our close ones, which are important, secondly important. And then we have the enemies and all of these sentient beings which we dislike, that we disregard. And so an important practice or within Buddhist philosophy, an important aspect to develop or view to develop is to be able to consider all these sentient beings as near and dear and considering in an equal manner. And this is done mainly through reflecting upon past and future lives and sort of proving the existence of past and future lives. And this is maybe something that we'll be able to explore and study at a later date together. But it is first, one is developing this understanding of the equal kindness of all sentient beings and then reinforcing it with this proof of past and future life. And so extending this kindness to all sentient beings, that there is no sentient beings who has not been incredibly kind to us.
Yeah. Taina di kontroje jite ane tananga suchi soso ni jasing di de shit dindi shisum ko gang ni kontro saung de tambo ni and di samlo kono tani sagorata and se tada shi menjo jite na be hajing ge soso nyin seung de hajing za chimbo da yang ta chi le pa ni sang de ya Shamba the jazz on the young Pedga Sosoga Samlo Nalia, Pet Tarimbo da Sinata, Pedga, Samlo Docho, Tion the young Tian Chick, Samlo Tatashi, Demenjosh, Tindishi go on gay any contrasaya. Penangazuchi, Jaya Mayunjo, Sosoga and Chin Jess and that India Mayunjo, Namji Chiang, Ti Parama, Pe Moboyoro, Tangazu Samlo Nalia, Soso Magasaya Mayunjo, Soso Gasaya Mayunjo. Tindi Parma yang senchepe mambo jiorda. Tesole yawa diwa karachona ngazo kontra sag mare semle macheba chungumdo. Te karachon chungoyo mare seterta. Deso tatang de ngazo sem samlo nalia. Ani chi hacheng karzorta kantare choni le sa chanjo yana namji na tangta da chinta se chungoyo. Hacheng ni yana ne bedga Drondon Rochen, Pedga touching but Zarching book, but Celigiba, when it's a giba tatan chick, Yanan win it's a ma bummy, better drowned or Magas and Rina. What did you get Tatani the tiny outside Joshire? Tiny Zan the dear one getting a control that Sama on there. 따따당데 원이나 파르마르치 따토요나 공nguyên se rimba de ta to yana yang dindi control de na mambo shi ni so so la ma yong ai yung do pe na ma zo ja ni kan mai parma e sencha la mini de ni kan e chung mo do se shi o de ni do.
And so as regards the basis of anger, we can think about this this division which exists within our mind in relation to close friends and enemies. And so we tend to have an extreme view, or a very sort of black and white perception, in a sense, of friends and enemies. So we see, the people that we, our enemies are as completely unimportant, and they're very, very far away from us. It's a very sort of alien concept. We feel completely disassociated to them. And on the other hand, we have our objects of attachment, in the sense, our friends that we consider as very, very important. But it's important to understand that between these two extremes, there is a middle ground. There is this middle sort of whole zone of sentient beings, which are qualified in a sense as strangers, or you could say as we feel neutral towards. And there are a lot of sentient beings which fall into this category where, we don't feel angry in relation to them, and we don't feel, very sort of elated or excited, when we see them. It's a very sort of neutral ground. And so we need to try and avoid falling into either of these extremes, of this extreme over-exaggeration of the qualities of, our friends, and on the other hand, our enemies, which we completely disregard and dislike, because when we fall into these extremes, we're actually giving a chance for anger and other disturbing emotions to arise. So it's by developing a kind of a sort of more neutral approach, finding more this middle ground, that we will be able to reduce our anger and other disturbing emotions. And we can see this, that, in relation to strangers or sentient beings we're neutral to, these disturbing emotions don't really arise.
Yeah. Well, then it's on the top end of Tampong, so some knowledge mason, same got tatang and it tatang de Parmajikan Machu Paptanasia. And hatching is socially pet Tanyebo Chimbu in but India Maima Mati Chap. And it young rainbow peke chick social magas at a dollar tatang de Mayunjo. Parmajikan is social simcum de Simcon the Pe Numbo to Chicon the Chishatona. Tini karchiayo rese ta tang nga soli yani tini yang kokab shira gres ti gani ta ko ne pena shinga shi ma sone shinga ri shina pe ke chik sacha ro de pe ni jo metor shi tap go na da yana chik ane chik karat tap go yona tangbo sacha de pe ni jo wo ri pe ke karina pe ke do ro da tin me jo pa ka ni bo shi so thona tini dele ya chik karat tam na pe ya ko che shin gro wa Tendo mazo semkonde tambo nyum gwa de piki chimbu chagores. Pe semkonde be tanda parmala tatang reji tatang ti gang le mas samlo ji papthona. Tini shini yawe chole ya tiel ya jitsa ro de tindi ji gang le ya ani tiel hajing pento chimbu ji gores.
And so developing this mental attitude of neutrality, in a sense, of kind of neutral, and this mind that we have in relation to strangers is quite beneficial. So instead of feeling very, very close and very sort of excited, in a sense, and attached to our friends, and on the other hand having the other extreme of feeling very distant and detached and far away from our enemies, trying to bring our mind and to channel our mind into this neutral state, this kind of neutral state, and this kind of a balanced, in a way, mental attitude that we have in relation to strangers. So it's kind of like the same. Once we have a mind which is balanced and, in a sense, neutral, we're giving ourselves an opportunity, and this opportunity is very similar to if we have a field and we have a ground and we decide to clear it out and weed it out and remove sort of all of the stones, in that sense, then we end up with a very kind of beautiful, smooth ground, which gives us the opportunity to plant and to grow whatever we wish, And this is exactly the same as the balanced mind. A balanced and neutral mind is a kind of perfect sort of mental ground in order to sort of start to turn our minds towards virtue and to bring it in that direction. But first we need to have this sort of, if we have this neutral mind, it will be much easier to bring our mind towards the positive.
Yeah, ane tadane di gani ngaso lobjang ro sen na kar jang ayore ngaso di kar pen togre sen din di lobjang di ngazo sem ga kang le ya samlo go ta tang de ani dindi manda yo ba de ngazo dinong ni jang der senanda ti chik lapchan ji le ya pe ki chimbore teng ge ro dindi ga samlo ani ta tang manda yo ba de ta ngazo ngo ni che cha go re ina ya ta ti yo ba de ngazo ngo zi ma to ya de chingro wa ngo zi ma to ne ta dindi ga samlo ta tang so so go chik samlo na le ya korcho manda de ngazo ni re choi to le ani rang chung rang jing ge yong de ya 다 용대요나 딘디가 삼로가 따당 용아에 아니 따당 레레야 아니 센종 레레 센종 레레가 젤리 먼저와 대식 친구도 응원도 기록데 아니 셈감래야 아니 직 삼선을 셈감데 베직 야외 초라 파친도야 삼선은 베드가 셈 참아 틱도야 삼선을 되네 지게 야외 초야 메죠 초와 파르만도 또 참아 센종 레레가 젤리 간에 대시대 지고레스 띄용데 단단디 가서기 컨트롤 열라 따당은 진짜 시제비 겁래나 컨트롤 찍보이나 열라 따당 먼저 뭐보식 내도도 어 된데 대수티 된 가서디 직다 가르쳐는 센종거 셈당 센종거 남자세야티 그런 가서래 왜니 잘 가려요바데 디시제고요와 어 된데 진 가서 니버데 너니 로경래 도고 열었어.
And so, in relation to our own mind training and our own personal practice, I guess the question which arises at this point is how do we do this? How do we develop such a neutral state of mind? And on top of that, how does it actually help me? How is this beneficial for myself? So it's important to first, and I think that we're all aware of this, to understand that we have different ways of seeing or different ways of perceiving reality, yeah? And the thing is that it's very, very hard for us to recognize how we are perceiving something. And so because our perception is it happens very, very quickly in a sense, and is very spontaneous, and it's very hard for us to be able to distinguish these different perceptions and these different ways of perceiving that we have. But if we are able, and this is actually why we are studying these mental factors, because the point is that once we understand these mental factors, we'll be able to see what brings disturbance into our minds. What is bringing our mind towards a positive side? What is bringing our mind towards confusion? What is bringing our mind towards a negative side, and so forth. So in here, when we start exploring anger, we're thinking about the objects, but not only the object, but how we start to perceive the object and the different ways of perceiving the object. So it's very important that we are able sort of to get a very pragmatic, down-to-earth sort of instruction for our daily life practice by engaging with these teachings.
Yeah. 아니 비완다요나 그만 yes 들어와. 아니
So does anybody have any questions? We have some time left now.
Yeah.
Yeah, William?
Yeah. Yes.
We can't hear you. Your microphone, I think. Yeah, great.
Hi, I have a question. Sometimes this neutral sort of people used to be referred as we have a indifferent relation to them. When you say we have to focus on this neutral, sometimes we don't incur the mistake to treat everyone in an indifferent way.
Kena konki kati shuya te karesana chitanga so semchem parmachik labiate parmati susutigi goto te kare ratugresana susutang chik koranzo te la chik chungna kare chungna zowa megyo rago chi chayore kare chungna chungra tende rago chik chade gyore susu parma semchen tende chikla chizang kandes tende chik sem tende ti chogla jaya tela kandes susu la pengere kaisina chitang susu semchen kare ina susu zorwa chik yogorwa parma ina kare chungna chung konki ngarang ki chudo mare tende rago chik samlo kor de gerwa ya
맞습니다. 저 배하고 들어. 단다디 so parma so samlo tatang de parma tagu gre shibi kabliya choa chuni mega kachet maris choa chuni menjo kachet maimba ane bagi senjala tabi kabliya hajenge bagi ne tanis malongwa se shungurwa tiga pena donda karesena ane yana susula nin betka zawa chimbu shiwuji ya ane chitani koran jiangu chani susa dan jiyo dan susa la zawa chimu yong chogre de ina de betka zawa di gang ya zawa chimbu shiwuji tani di garjana susa simle ya noba le de ya ane di yung gangai mongbo chi che de ya yung do ane yang chik susa le magawa de betka magawa de jinsa mongbo chang ne jinsa mongbo chi sawlo tang de yong de yang di gang ne susa simle ya ane gangai che de ya shi dinde maiba ane chi parma se ade pege chowa chune menjo kachet maresi pasho de gar chongna chongte ane yigsho se dinde maiba do dana parma se de taki sosole no ba ga samlo soso simkan tingdo chongni shi ma no dinde parma ta to goresi donda de dinde shi gresi
That's so. So your question, it's a very good question, very interesting question. Because when I talk about developing this attitude of neutrality, it doesn't mean actually indifference. It doesn't mean feeling indifferent and feeling disconnected from others. It has to do with much more, if we take as a general sense how we perceive sentient beings, when we talk about having a neutral view in relation to them, it means to not be extreme in that sense. So in the sense of when we have, for example, friends or people we feel close to, we have this excessive kind of exaggeration of their qualities and excessive kind of, we think that they're very, very important in that sense. And it's true that people who are connected to us and who benefit us are important, but we're not looking at them in a balanced way. We're exaggerating. There's an excessive sort of exaggeration which is occurring in relation to those people which are close to us in that sense. And on the other hand, because this excessiveness, being excessive and exaggerating actually harms our mind and troubles our mind in a lot of ways. And on the other hand, the other extreme, which would be sentient beings which we don't like, so enemies, we come up with so many reasons, to validate and to confirm, and we need to reconfirm how horrible they are, how unpleasant they are, how negative they are. And this creates quite obviously a lot of disturbance in our mind. So when we're talking about being neutral, it's not about being indifferent, but it means standing very clear from either of these extremes in a sense. Neither this kind of exaggeration and this excessive kind of this being excessive or intense about the situation in relation to the close ones, and on the other hand, not disregarding and rejecting on the other hand. So it's remaining in somewhat kind of clear from either of those extremes. So not being indifferent, being neutral from those two extremes.
ane ji suso de na suso de pe de zawa cheta ge chune shamba de le moi ni se ge jingone kansa samba ji ge ta na ane nga dang ane ta kansa ni ba ni ga ngone chana levan dros ma song de ku ramba ji ge chig gang le chig pa de chig cha de ora kansa samba ta dang gang ni ta na ina kansa tangbo ngarang ge gang ni sawla tang ga le kansa nipa le ngarang ane le chik rambaji ma son ya parni soso za chet cha kansa nipa de karmu karchena des ko de rambaji ma son des ma pap sarta samlo korang gani te paonde ngone khuni ga ane ramba chikbar ji gang le yo na yang soso ga samlo na ne soso de ya des za che samlo taonde ta chi de onde ta de za chumbu cha sa onde de songjo ga chet ta mangbo shi khugura saya konya karina yang tele yaga de zawa che de go yore shamba jule drsona sozole tambo de go yore nipa de shini shamba chi tenga so ran shingu yugo de zo ta dang de karre song de gedang de sozole ya zawa chimu tse gore sozo ane chi pambo re tsama nambi ta de gang ni shena yang nipa de chite che go se ta ran pe mambo song yore sozo pambo ina pambo ziki pangta karina 그 사마이나요 대당 참아간 배 뭐부 되셔요. 고용 자와이니 아니 가르서다 karzo chiti che gung mare tindi kache mare ina chiti che tang shiro porque tsawa chung zentang shiro zentang de ko tatar zentona ze tere ta ti chenda semgang le kanga mongbo chinyor to rese
Chiti sena susu tigi
chiti
tika.
che ze ja chibaran zamba chiti
Allez, lasso. Mhm. Lasso. And so an example of this would be if we think of I and, this I, which is so important, it's like the holiest thing on earth in a sense. And afterwards we have somebody else, and the other is considered much, is a lower grade as us, we consider them, just as a bit lower as us. And if let's say we have, so there's us, there's me, and then there's another person, and then there's a third character in the situation. So the third person is looking at, I and this other person, the second person, and considers them as the same, I and this other person are actually the same. But from my perspective, because I am I, because it's me, I am immediately a bit more elevated. I'm considered much more, I'm just important, in relation to the other. And because I'm important, I will give myself good food, I will give myself good clothes, and everything else which I can give to the other, to the second person, I will, it won't be as good, because why? Because I'm considering them a grade down in a sense. I don't have a balanced view and an equal view in relation to themselves. And in Buddhist philosophy, it's important to care for oneself, but there is also, if we have this excessiveness, this exaggerated care that we give to ourselves, it actually creates a lot of disturbance within our minds.
yeah ani mena ngasuti ti sut santwa
Okay, so if that's an okay answer to your question, then maybe we'll leave it at this for today. Yeah, it's okay.
yeah maybe yeah tuchena ini
Yeah, perfect.
thank you tuche yeah
Yeah, see you next week.
You.
Thank you.
yeah okay chino
Bye.
You bye.
Nice.